Okay, we can go ahead and get started. We'll probably have a few more people join. But hello and welcome to a special event for Women's History Month, Women Architects of the Past, Present, and Future. The event tonight is presented by the AIA East Bay Young Architects Forum and Emerging Professionals Committee. I'm Jaime Matheron, one of the chairs of the committee and a board member of AIA East Bay. We have three wonderful guests this evening who will provide some background on the study of women in architecture history, and then provide some perspectives in a panel discussion to discuss the profession today and in the future. So let me briefly introduce our three guests, and then we will hear more from them later. We have Geny Munoz, a licensed architect with HOK. Her focus is healthcare design, and she has served as a mentor for the AIA East Bay 5x5x5 mentorship program. We have Ellen Abraham, a design project manager with SOM and founder of the newly formed Global Equity Design Lab. She is also an entrepreneur and creator of a pin startup company called Architect Pins, which highlights the highly diverse design identities within our industry. And if you stay all the way until the end, you'll get a discount code for her pin shop. And finally, we have Pacific Austin, who is with Dallin and a recent graduate of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. While there, she assistant taught a few courses, including a new course that she helped originate, which was centered on racism in architectural history and theory. So first, I'll talk about a few things that just kind of inspired tonight's discussion. So here's our panelists here. Of course, we've all seen this home in architecture history, and we know that this home was designed by a man. And I probably had assumed that the client was a man as well. And I even have the Lego version of it. And I had no idea until just last year that the Farnsworth in Farnsworth House was actually Dr. Edith Farnsworth, a woman who earned her MD in 1938, became an associate professor of medicine, never married, and yet had the means to hire Mies van der Rohe to design her home. So one of the directors of the home as a museum now wrote, "We hope that the seemingly simple act of inserting her first name has a larger effect of inserting her into the ongoing history of modern architecture." So it can kind of start to, make you think, well, who else has been written out of history, or who else have we not really heard about that we should have, whether they were architect or client or however involved in the process. Also, one of my favorites in architecture history has always been Julia Morgan. And she lived from 1872 to 1957. She's a local right here to the East Bay, born in Oakland. And she was the first woman licensed architect in California, the first woman admitted to the most prestigious school of architecture at the time, and faced a lot of opposition to even getting admitted to that school in Paris, the École des Beaux-Arts. And she was the first woman awarded the AIA Gold Medal. But unfortunately, that was posthumously in 2014. So for some reason, it took from even that long after her death until 2014 for them to award her the gold medal. And she was the first woman to receive that. And I think that, I had often admired her work and her, persistence to becoming an architect. But I also at some point realized that, while her contributions are significant here in the East Bay, here's a couple of her projects here in the East Bay. So of course, she faced a ton of adversity to, becoming an architect at all. And also, if you research about her, she did come from a very wealthy family. So it is true, and it's probably important to acknowledge that her wealth and her race and her family connections really did play a role in at least, opening up some opportunities for her that then she certainly had to accomplish great things. But it's probably important to kind of acknowledge that despite her ability, that wouldn't have even been possible if she didn't have some of those privileges. So we'll go next into, these are the kind of questions that inspired the conversation. So thinking about how many significant women have been excluded from the history that we've learned, and then how has race, wealth, and privilege impacted who has even been able to practice architecture. So first we'll bring in our guest, Pacific Austin, who is going to take us through some of the framework. And I'll click through her slides whenever she's ready. Go ahead, Pacific, welcome. Oh, and you are on mute.
Beginner's mistake, thank you. And thank you for the introduction, for this opportunity. As Jaime mentioned, I had the opportunity to help compile research for a new course at Cal Poly. Sorry, let me take that toy from my dog. Sorry, one second.
That's fine. I have a dog here too, so I had to, do some prep work to make sure he was calm during the presentation, something we're all dealing with. So, all right, thank you, Pacific.
Thank you. Sorry.
Sure.
In that position, I worked under a very wonderful teacher and mentor to me, Assistant Professor Padma Maitland, who has the goal in his position at Cal Poly of reforming the art history curriculum. And so much of the information that I learned came from that course, and much of it also comes from race and modern architecture, which I think Jaime has at the end for you to see if you are interested in this topic. And that was edited by Irene Cheng, Charles L. Davis II, and Mabel O. Wilson, and published in 2020, so very recently here. So while none of us have really had the same experience learning architectural history, I think we can all appreciate the importance that it plays in our field. If you've never watched Kirby Ferguson's Everything is a Remix, I highly recommend it. The basic premise is that all design processes rely on the same basic techniques of copy, transform, and combine. That is, that we use what we know to create something that is similar, but not exactly what we know. Is that annoying? Sorry, she found it.
You're good.
Boy in question.
All right.
Sorry.
Sure, no problem. All right, next slide.
Yes. So the implication of this in our field is that we rely on architecture of the past to not only design new projects, but also contextualize them. But we can only rely on what we know. So what is the content that you were taught? What do you remember from your art history class? If you're anything like me, you might have sat in a stuffy lecture hall listening to a very well-educated man click through the same lecture slides that he had been using for the past 10 years. Architectural history is typically taught in a linear progression. And although our text at Cal Poly was called A Global History of Architecture, the majority of non-Western architecture was in that first section in what is probably prehistory to late Middle Ages era. And that really makes it seem like the majority of the world population only developed and only had significant architecture in the past. So how did architectural history come to be presented this way? In her essay, Structural Racialism in Modern Architectural Theory, Cheng describes the history of our history, if you will, the movements that impacted the development of architectural styles. In the first half of the 19th century, there was a rise of racial thinking that definitely built on pre-existing prejudices of the 18th century. And this gave way to a belief in distinct racial natures that were believed to be responsible for cultural development or lack thereof. This belief also trended alongside an increase in European sense of superiority, and scholars have cited slavery and imperialism as the main impetuses for these race theories, which were used to justify imperial subjugation and racial slavery. Cheng writes that race theory manifested itself in architectural thought in at least three main ways. First, in the growth of typological theories. For example, each nation has a race with a distinct architecture, and that architecture is impacted by the mental attributes or character of a population, whereas before it was more based on the climate or environment, or thought to be based on the climate or environment. And a big champion of this was the writer Eugene Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc, excuse my French, who was strongly influenced by contemporary race theorists. In his writing, Histoire de la habitation humaine, Viollet-le-Duc described physical traits and mental attributes of race according to contemporary racial stereotypes, even going so far as associating a specific dwelling type, material, and construction method to each race, and suggesting that the overall understanding of this association between race and architecture could help form national architectures, and that could help nations follow true progress, quote unquote. And of course, we can probably assume where that ends up later in the 20th century. The second manifestation of race theory, can you go to the next slide, Jaime? The second manifestation of race theory in architectural thought was in narratives of architectural history premised on evolution, diffusion, and hybridization of populations. Here, Viollet-le-Duc had more to say, theorizing that architecture of places were a result of the mixing of different races, and that those cultures who were mixed with the then known or then theorized to be the Aryan race was superior. He even took it so far as to postulate that the monumental architecture of Central and South America must have been built by a white race that migrated across the Bering Strait, as he could not even fathom that the indigenous people of those countries could build those monumental works. American architects such as William LeBaire and Geny, Henry Van Brunt, and John Root were all very influenced by these racial histories, including that of Viollet-le-Duc, who used their ethnographically framed accounts to postulate that a new American race would bring about a new superior architectural style in the American West. Lastly, next slide, please. Race theory was manifested in the arrangement of architectural forms into linear and developmental scales from primitive to modern. And what I think is my favorite quote from this essay, Chang writes, "Technology and empire enabled Europeans to imagine themselves as predestined by biological aptitude to advance, conveniently ignoring that their economic and technological development was enabled by raw materials, labor, and markets appropriated through imperial conquest, while disrupting colonized countries' own trajectories." We might all recognize the culmination of this arrangement of architectural forms in Bannister Fletcher's Tree of Architecture diagram, which depicts non-Western architecture low and in short branches at the bottom, while Western or European architecture rises prominently through the center into outstretched branches above. Chang goes on to describe how in the 20th century, sorry, next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Describe how in the 20th century, these racial theories were still present, but sublimated much in the way that we understand colorblind racelessness to be a form of racism today. In his 1913 essay, Ornament and Crime, Adolf Loos decried ornament to be a clear sign of stagnation and once again arrayed different cultural styles along a spectrum from the inhabitants of New Guinea and the indigenous people of North America to the English and European Americans. By 1932, modernism was presented by Henry Russell Hitchcock and Philip Johnson as sterile, as a universal aesthetic, and as one that lacks association with any specific race or nationality. So traditional discourse, we can see that traditional discourse of architectural theory was assembled on a framework of controlled narratives and revisionist history, wherein white people, white men in particular, really decided what architecture was important. And this was all done under the guise of universality and further erasing diversity when it came to the modern era. So when Jaime first reached out to me, she asked if I knew of any female women architects of color that might be highlighted in Women's History Month. And I had a really hard time coming up with anything. And I think that's something that I need to work on myself. But in my research, it was also hard to find these narratives of women architects of color. So I hope this following narrative will kind of help us understand what the industry was like prior to our modern era. So Sophia Hayden was born in Santiago, Chile, to a Chilean father and American mother in 1869. She was one of the first women, she was in the first graduating class that allowed women, earning a degree from MIT in 1890. After her graduation, she was not able to find a job in architecture and she resigned to just teach technical drawing at a Boston high school. Just 1 year after her graduation, she responded to a call for women architects to submit designs for the Women's Building, which was part of Daniel Burnham's World Columbian Exposition in Chicago. She designed a 2-story Italian Renaissance style building and won the first prize with her submission. She received $1,000 and all men who submitted similar submissions to similar competitions received 10 times that. Due to the micromanagement and the demands from the construction committee during construction, accounts suggest that Hayden's mental health declined in the months after the building's opening. She was placed in a sanitarium and she never worked as an architect again. I don't know if that's not gaslighting for you, I don't really know what is. Although she was often used back then as an example of why women should not be in the field, we can see her today as a woman who was strong and broke down barriers and help bring light to the inequality that was in the field and still is to this day. Another woman who defied the notions of what an architect is was Beverly Lorraine Green, FAIA. She was born in 1915 in a working class family and grew up on the south side of Chicago in what is known as the Black Belt. She studied at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and earned a bachelor's in architectural engineering and a master's in city planning and housing. She would later go on to earn a master's of architecture as well. Throughout her career, she showed great care and commitment to her community. She worked for the Chicago Housing Authority, where she worked on a community housing project, the Ida B. Wells Housing Project, which was a landmark project for the Black community in Chicago. She earned her license in December of 1942 when she became the first Black architect in the United States, first licensed Black female architect in the United States. She would go on to join the CANA, which would later become the New York Coalition of Black Architects and work for several members therein. She was a draftsperson for an NYU expansion project, as well as the UNESCO Secretariat and Conference Hall in Paris. She's also known for her Unity Funeral Hall pictured here, which became a Harlem institution and the location of Malcolm X's wake. She's also known for the sanctuary of the Christian Reformed Church, during which process she worked with the church's first Black minister. Throughout her career, she continued her commitment to helping women join the field and pave the way for their opportunities and validity therein. She died suddenly after a brief illness on October 26, 1957, and her memorial was held at this very funeral home that she had completed only 4 years prior. Although her life was tragically short, we can definitely learn from her influence. She was a champion for all women in her field of all races, and sought through her primary employment and her extracurricular activities to bring women of color into the field. So with these narratives of, the history of history, if you will, and women who we can look up to and who have paved the way for us women to be here in this field, how has this racism and sexism affected our field? So we can see that there has been an erasure of the contributions of women of color and a lack of representation, which creates sort of a feedback loop that women don't see themselves in the field, so they don't think, or it doesn't immediately come to mind that they can be in the field. And like I said, we can only design from what we know because everything is a remix, like I mentioned at the beginning. So if we're only designing within the development styles that we've learned, then we are designing within a style based in racist theory unless we really confront like the many intricacies that is involved in that. And we are limited in the styles and techniques that we are familiar with, and we fail to listen to others who are outside of our framework of what we consider architecture to be. So on this next slide, I have a few questions that you might ask yourself when you are looking at a new precedent or thinking about the things that influence your design style. So who designed this building and what were their general ethics? What privileges did the designers benefit from and what adversity did they face? Why was this building constructed and who was it constructed for? What style was the building designed in and why? Could this program have been more effective in another form? Why is this building important to architectural history? And why is this building important to me or my project? So just as history is inherently political. And while we cannot cleave architecture from values or movements, we can seek to understand the greater context of place and time and see architecture as a vehicle for progress. Because everything is a remix, give thought to what your source materials are. Thank you for giving me the space tonight, Jaime. And I really look forward to hearing what the other panelists have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Pacific. That's fantastic. So we can move into, that's kind of the past, and we can move into the present. And so there are many organizations that I've become familiar with in the last few years, especially that are led by women and founded by women, and that are leading on advocacy and activism, especially for women of color. And so some of our panelists even are acquainted with or know personally or have heard talks from some of these women who are leading these organizations. So we'll hear a little bit more about them. But here's a few names and some of these accomplishments that you might want to do some more research. So Alicia Ponce it wrote Latinas in Architecture, Stories of Raising the 1%, One Latina at a Time. Pascal Sablon, you might have seen some AIA communications. If you're on any of the AIA mailing list, she recently was elevated to the College of Fellows and became an FAIA, which is an extremely rare and extremely prestigious honor. Only 3% of AIA members have that distinction. And she was one of the youngest to ever receive that honor. And so that was just last year that she received that honor, and as well as that 2021 Whitney M. Young Jr. Award. And she created the Beyond the Built Environment organization. And then Tiara Hughes is the executive director of the First 500. She founded that organization, which elevates Black women architects. And of course, as you probably know, there's fewer than 500 Black women living architects in America. And so that organization seeks to increase the numbers of Black women architects. And she won an award also from the AIA last year, the 2021 AIA Associates Award. And then Julia Gamelina, she founded Madam Architect, which has a really nice Instagram page that highlights a lot of different women architects doing all kinds of different things. And it kind of branches out even beyond just the traditional practice of architecture that we're familiar with. And so that's another great person to do some more research into. So now we will, I'll stop sharing and we will bring in our other guests for our panel discussion. So let me just switch my screens around here. All right, so we'd like to welcome in Geny Munoz and Ellen Abraham. And so can you both introduce yourselves, and let's start with Geny and just take a few minutes to tell us about yourself, and then we'll launch into the panel discussion.
Thank you again, Jaime, for inviting me to be a part of this tonight. And thank you everyone for joining. Again, my name is Geny Munoz. I'm a project architect with HOK. And as Jaime mentioned, I focus primarily on healthcare and have done so for the majority of my career. I did spend some time doing some residential work as well as higher education. But I found that healthcare really was my passion, and that's kind of what I've stuck to since then. Most of my experience is construction administration. And these days I'm moving more into the schematic design phases and really getting a handle of the full spectrum of a project from beginning to end.
That's fantastic. Thank you. All right. And Ellen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Abraham. I am a design project manager at SOM. I am based in New York, and right now talking to you from Kansas City, out here with our team for the week. I don't have a focus in architecture as yet, and I'll explain that a bit more as I, through the evening. And I'm also the owner of Architect Pins, a company I founded so that I could highlight our diversity and also our design journeys in our industry.
Wonderful, thank you. So can you both tell us about, when you were young, did you have any exposure to an architect? Because I think that's something interesting to think about. Architects aren't people that, everyone gets to meet when they're young. And so did you have any exposure to an architect? And if you did, or what was your sense of the profession or your image of the profession? Did it seem foreign or welcoming or unknown? What did you think about that? So Geny, let's start with you.
None whatsoever. Didn't know about it until it started becoming an interest of mine. So and that was in high school. So prior to that, I had probably never even heard the word architecture. Never knew anyone that actually worked in that. I mean, I had some familiarity with construction because I had family members that worked in construction, but the idea of architecture never came about.
Interesting. All right. And Ellen, what about you?
Well, I grew up on the island of Dominica, and I did not grow up seeing any female architects. I was introduced to architecture when my dad, he's a career policeman, he designed our house and he would take me to the construction site as a kid. I would say around between 8 to 10 years old. And I was introduced to architecture through art school, actually, because we would always paint the French Creole houses on the island. And it was during my teenage years, I was introduced formally to Caribbean architects, but they were all male, and that was fine for me. And I realized that this was something that I could pursue.
That's wonderful. And so then, Geny, that's interesting that you had no exposure to it. So then tell us about your journey and your path. So at some point you chose architecture and you chose to study that in college. And then I know you've become licensed. So tell us about your path from that decision and then all the way up to your journey through licensure.
Sure. It didn't actually start until my sophomore year of high school. That year, I didn't want to take PE, so I had to fulfill my technical credit, and I did drafting. It sounded more interesting to me than wood shop. That was a little more intimidating. So yeah, I did hand drafting. Really enjoyed lettering and drawing all the angles with my 2 triangles and my T-square. And I was really drawn to it, really enjoyed it. And my drafting teacher really encouraged me to pursue architecture in college. He helped me figure out what schools in California to apply to, even have some backups in Arizona. So I had a lot of help from him. No one in my family had gone to college. I was the first one. I had siblings that didn't even graduate high school, so I didn't have a lot of positive examples, but I did know I didn't want to follow that path. So I really have gave a lot of credit to my drafting teacher, who then said, if you're going to study this, the only place to go is Cal Poly. And I was fortunate enough to be accepted. Once there, though, I did struggle quite a bit. Part of it was because I don't think I was as prepared as I thought I would have been. And just the culture shock as well. And the pressure from family to succeed, while it was just a bit too much. So what was supposed to be a 5-year program for me ended up being 8. You know, I spent some time not in school, lost financial aid. Definitely a lot of struggle, but eventually I got through it and stuck with it. Once I graduated, of course, that was in 2008 during the recession. So yet another roadblock, but I was fortunate to get hired into a small firm in Los Angeles as an administrative assistant, and that turned into a full-time architecture position. So that really began my career in healthcare, really prepared me with a lot of the Revit knowledge that I currently have. And even then, the licensure idea was still far off. I was hesitant to even start yet another thing, and I think part of it was I didn't see the value of it at the time. I felt that I could still, continue working in architecture and not necessarily be licensed. And I think that was just out of my own ignorance. Once I realized that I probably should get licensed to then be able to take my career further, I did start my licensure journey. And failed just about every single test at one point in time. So yet again, a few more roadblocks, a couple more struggles. And I finally passed my last ARE with 2 weeks left on my first exam. So I really took advantage of those 5 years on that clock. But I did it, and same with the CSE. So yeah, it was definitely a hard struggle, but I, took it at my own pace every step of the way from college all the way through licensure, and happy to say that I did get licensed in 2017, finally.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that with us. And Ellen, I know that you have the pin company and you're also working in the traditional format of architecture. So can you talk a little bit about your journey as well, and then kind of the balance of your the realm of traditional architecture and unconventional paths, because I know sometimes people are interested in branching out within architecture.
Sure. So after high school on the island, I went to college and I did 2 years of building engineering. And I was first in my class, got a scholarship, and decided to move to New York to pursue architecture. And coming here, it was a huge culture shock. Just learning how to survive, to rent a place, to live in winter, for example. Also to understand immigration and the cultural nuances too. So I did get accepted 2 years after coming here at City College in New York. Went to undergrad, had a great time, met lots of designers from across the world, like really diverse school. And I graduated in 2010. And during that time, I could not find a traditional architectural position. I did have internships while I went to school, but I feel like if my recollection serves me right, the economy was probably slow in that year, and I couldn't find a job. But I did get hired by Dwayne Reed in their store design department. Dwayne Reed was acquired by Walgreens, and so in that capacity, I was able to design their high-end retail, which includes pharmacy, parts of healthcare, et cetera, and learn the strategy behind those type of stores. Also to liaise between different departments, all the way from HR, construction, marketing, or real estate groups. It really helped me to have a wider view of what our industry can do. And after that position, I went to AECOM, and I worked in both the architecture and the strategy plus studio. And that was really interesting as well, because I was able to get traditional architectural experience, which was great, but also using my past experience, able to come in even in the stage before pre-design, where you're doing all the analytics for your owner, your prospective owner, even before architects come into the picture. And so I was told that I should pursue a business degree. And so I went on to Northeastern to acquire an MBA, which I'm happy I did, because again, it helped me to have an international view of what we can do. And so at SOM, it's really helped me, because yes, I moved from interior architecture, then went to large scale architecture. Right now, I'm on the management side, leading within an aviation team. That's why I'm in Kansas City at this point. But also with the wider knowledge too of economy, of policy, of even finance, you're able now to step into different roles within our process, as opposed to only design. So for those who are interested in, that type of, I guess, depth or flow in and out of traditional architecture, I think it's definitely worth it.
That's great, thank you. And can you both talk a little bit about some of those organizations that we may have mentioned? I know you have some knowledge of them and of the leaders, the women that have founded them. And you both mentioned Culture Shock a bit. And so I'm wondering is there some specific inspiration that you take from those women or from the organizations that they created? And, is there something specific that you'd like people to know that you think that those kind of organizations can really create some kind of community and help people? Ellen, you can go first, and then we'll go back to Jenny.
Sure. So I work with Tiara. Tiara works at SOM. She's in the Chicago office as well. We're both in NOMA. I just got off the NICOBA board that was mentioned earlier in New York. And so I'm very familiar with First 500 and saw the genesis of that coalition. Pascal also is in New York. She's a friend of mine, and Beyond the Built is amazing. I have been featured as well in some of her exhibitions. Julia, again, is in the New York circuit and have seen her. I think her idea started from a board I served on called Architects, which focuses on the females in architecture. And Architina I've been following for a while. One of their founders I work with at SOM as well. So it's been really great to see the genesis of these communities. They're really born out of the need for community while you go through your journey. Because as women, sometimes we feel very alone. Construction is a male-dominated field. It still is, and that's okay. And so the more you can lean on and learn from others, the more you can highlight others, you will start to see the many paths that contribute to our impact. And so I'm very happy for these women and completely support what they're doing. There's lots of others as well that are in the genesis stage. And I hope to see more of these communities, because it really emboldens us, right? It gives us a lot more confidence to tell our stories. So I'm really happy to see all of these grow.
That's great. Thank you. All right. And Geny, how about for you?
So for me, I more recently became familiar with Argentina, which is founded by Alicia Ponce. And their goal is to, provide mentorship and help those coming through both architecture school and licensure to increase the number of Latinas in the profession and licensed Latinas as well. So for me, what drew me to that also is just hearing the similar stories that were like mine and knowing that there's someone out there that's also like me, and so that I can also share my story, and future or younger generations also can realize that it can be done. Some of us, we're out there, we've done it, we've been there, and we can give back and provide that same mentorship. I'm also part of other organizations, NOMA, and Latinas and Latinos, or now it's Latinx in architecture as well. So those things always connect me to other opportunities to get involved, whether it's in mentoring or even just providing monetary donations where needed to continue developing other programs and helping those pursuing careers in architecture and related fields to actually work through that and any kind of barriers, be it financial or otherwise.
That's great. And what is something that you're doing to help the next generations of architects and designers? And is that something that you wish, is that kind of filling a void that you wish had been available to you, or would that have made your journey smoother if something like that would have been available? Geny, you can go first.
Definitely. So as I mentioned that, I also, through those organizations, I've been connected to various programs that work with high schools. So I've hosted visits for firms, job shadows. I currently do visits to various middle school and high school classes throughout Oakland Unified School District, just to give an introduction to the careers available, the pathways to those careers in the ACE industry, and types of tools we use, just to get students, engaged, interested, and making them realize that these careers are actually available to them and that it is an option. And through that, one of the past events I had one student, and we were doing a tour of a construction site, and I tried my best to get him to be engaged, and he just was kind of, just following along, not really paying attention. And no matter how hard I tried, I just thought that he was not interested at all. And weeks later, I received a thank you note from him, and he said, I went home and I talked to my parents about today, and I think this is a possibility for me. This is something I'm interested in. And I was completely caught by surprise by it, because I thought he had zero interest. And so just knowing that, it's those small stories that keeps me involved and keeps me volunteering for the 5x5 mentorship, or just anything either within my own firm or just outside in my spare time.
That's great. Thank you. And before we go to Ellen, let's say we'll ask a few more questions, but if anybody has any questions, if you can type them in the chat, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions coming up here in a little bit for any of our three panelists. All right. And then Ellen, so same kind of question about what are you doing to give back or help the next generation? And is that something you wish was available to you when you were younger and coming through your journey?
That's a great question. I feel like I don't have a particular route yet. I do different things though. One is being myself and being very vocal about my path, because I don't feel like I am that special. There are other people who have the same paths. And so it's great to just amplify that, to encourage others to go through school, to get various experiences, and also to try different parts of our industry as well too. But at work, at particular, myself and others, we have been coalescing to widen the pool of interns. Some persons will feel like some firms are not for them or won't be inclusive of them. And so it's really trying to change the narrative to know you should apply to certain large firms and to show your talent and to show your, the diverse education that you bring. So I did serve as a summer intern recruiter for a while. And working on boards such as NOMA or then architects, doing fellowships with the Urban Design Forum. When you occupy these spaces, you're able to learn what your community needs or what the next generation needs. And so you're able to create space for them. And so that's really what I've been doing right now. And then with Architect Pins, it's really just trying to create more of a voice for designers or other people with different paths who may not have the confidence to say, hi, this is me. You could walk into a room and show others your identity or characteristics of your journey that you'd like to amplify, and organically then create these relationships.
Thank you. That's great. And then let's bring Pacific back in for this one too. So the question in general would be, what is a change that you would like to see either in the academic approach to architecture and or to the architectural profession to make it more inclusive? So Pacific, I know especially you have worked in the academic field recently and as a scholar and as an assistant teacher. So, and you're doing all that research, you probably have some things as you kind of alluded to earlier. So is there something that you can think of about that you'd like to see change in the academic approach?
Like I said, I definitely think that at least at Cal Poly, I'm sure at other schools in the past year, there's been a lot of talk about changing the curriculum of architectural history in particular, but also the way we teach studios. Are we teaching studios from like earnestly trying to understand community and what, the interrelationship between these very important issues of equity and equality and diversity? Like, are we really trying to understand that? Or are we just coming from it as like, this is a 10-week studio project, have at it, pretend like you know what you're talking about? I think that we really have to think more about where those syllabi are coming from and understanding that it should be something that allows students to reflect deeply and interact with community, like on a one-on-one basis and in person. So I know in my last year at Cal Poly, I was mostly virtual, but there was a lot of discussion about that going around as well.
That's great. And then for Geny, either academic or professional, something that you'd like to see change in the profession or academic to make it more inclusive?
Well, I'm speaking to my own education path, I think, and also it's been like more than 10 years. At that time, I think if it were more aligned to pathways within your actual career in architecture, because not all of us come out of architecture school being designers. Some of us become project managers and some of us become technical architects. So not pushing so much on the design end so that, you're forced to feel like you have to be creative, because that's not what we all do. I think that would be one thing that better aligns with the actual career paths once you are in a firm, and removing some barriers, make it affordable. In particular, that's what is, discourages a lot of people is the fact that they can't afford school. If it's more well known what your various pathways are, that if you don't go to a 5-year program, it's okay. You can still find the correct training that won't limit you or won't, make you jump through even more hoops as you're trying to do your internship hours or your AREs.
That's great. Yeah, that point too that you said about, if you're not a designer or something. And I was watching an Instagram live last week between Tiara Hughes and Julia Gamelina, and they were talking about kind of expanding the scope of architecture. And that might be a way too, where, we see the numbers aren't what we would like them to be of women in architecture. And so if people are taking slightly different paths within architecture, instead of saying, oh, you're not in architecture anymore, there could be the opportunity to kind of widen what is included in the sphere of the architecture world.
I agree. I don't know how many of you, I only had one professional development class in my entire 5 years of undergrad, one, right? And in that class, it was, I don't know, it was so different than the actual business of architecture. It just blew my mind how sort of unprepared I felt and my friends felt, transitioning into full-time jobs. And just to piggyback on what you guys are saying, it's really important that in school, and in internships that we educate on the different paths of architecture, that yeah, it is okay to not be technical. It is okay to not be a designer. And there's so many other lucrative paths that you could have with your architectural degree. And if you're not exposed to that, you know, Google, try to go to events, find boards, organizations, adjacent industries to learn what those are. Because lots of my colleagues, aren't leaving architecture, but are going in parallel paths. You know, they're going into tech, they're going into business development, they're going into people management of architects, right, and of construction, real estate finance, for example. So we really need to widen, I agree with you, Jenny, just to widen the breadth of what we can do as architects and designers, for real, because a lot of kids don't know. And until we have a session with them, they're like, oh, I never thought I could do that. And it's really because how we're taught in school.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I'm going to share this final slide, so that, right, so you can, if anybody wants to take a screenshot of it in the last few minutes, or, you know, to have these resources. So can you all see this slide? Okay, great. So we have, these are two of the books that we talked about: Race and Modern Architecture, Latinas in Architecture. And then this is a website, profiles of 50 women who have made important contributions to American architecture. These are the Instagram handles of 4 of these organizations that we talked about, but you can also just search them. And then, of course, as promised, we have the Architect Pins promo code. So use code AIAEB for AIA East Bay for 20% off all pins at Architect Pins, which is Ellen's company. So we'll do a couple more questions. So last chance to get your questions in the chat. And let's see, we had one here, although it's hard to see I can find the chat. Okay, there's the chat when I'm sharing my screen. Okay, we have one from Shika who says, Ellen, you have found many opportunities or found resources, or sorry, let me start again. Ellen, have you found opportunities or resources for how you can directly use your architectural skills to give back to your home island? Also, my Architect Pins shipped today. Thank you. Oh, she missed out on the discount. Thank you. Thank you for providing me with a tangible way to display my pride as a designer and my identity. And she said it's okay that she missed the discount.
Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. So yes, I do give back. My parents, my cousins, everyone is still back home. And so I do go to the Caribbean very often. And every time I go home, I make sure to walk construction sites with the guys who are there. Again, there are no women. Just to keep a pulse on construction within the Caribbean, and also construction for hurricanes, right? Like after Hurricane Maria demolished Puerto Rico, it actually demolished my island first. We were a direct hit, and then it went to Puerto Rico. And so, you know, the Caribbean is really trying to get better prepared for category 4 and 5 and probably 6 hurricanes. I do go to other islands as well where I do have architectural friends. LinkedIn is my best friend. I do find other young women, but also other men too, who are in our industry, meet up with them when I travel, see what they're doing, go to their events, go to their construction sites. And that way you're able to then contribute and then share, cross-pollinate against, you know, what we do in America, because that's where I work right now, and what is going on in the Caribbean. But I definitely do give back.
That's great, thank you. And okay, last chance to take a screenshot of this resources slide, and I'm going to take it down, and then last chance to get your questions in. So I'll ask one more question. I think that sometimes in professional life and training that we all receive, sometimes it's like for women, like be more this or more that. And oftentimes that comes from sort of a masculine energy or just historical way that people have behaved or whatever within business in general or architecture. So are there things that you've seen women leaders do, or traits or energies or whatever that you've just seen that you think that actually everyone could do well by adopting any of those kind of things? Anyone can go first who has an idea for that.
I would say empathy. My male mentors and counterparts, they don't really, well, that's a generalist statement. Maybe I shouldn't say they don't, but for the most part, they don't really empathize with other people's thought processes per se. And the women leaders that I sit with, they always try to understand where the person is coming from, how they learn, how they communicate in order to make the teams run better. And I feel like that's a trait as women as nurturers. I absolutely love that as a management style.
That's great. Yeah, I've noticed sometimes listening to, just had different experiences where in my previous firm, when I was doing schools, we had to go to the state architect to get plans approved. And there was a situation where some engineer or something had sent in a very brash older man who just thought he could kind of, power his way through, and just really alienated these reviewers at the state architect's office. And so then they came to our firm and said, okay, we need like a soft voice in the room, or we need just like a different energy to go there, because now we've kind of screwed up this whole relationship with this office. And so then I went in and I was kind of a junior person at the time, but I just went in. And so it was just more of the energy that you're presenting with could actually move things along. And so that was a situation I had where it was like, okay, just being like this tough man was actually causing problems in this situation. So anybody else have something?
I think for me, one thing that I've been thinking a lot about has been like when to take up space and when to give space to others. So I think that, as we see more of our peers come into our field and as we encourage others to join, like we have to make sure that we're providing opportunities for them as much as we were provided opportunities for, and making sure that this goes both ways, right? Like, let's help each other to be better, to, learn more. Sorry, distracted by the chat.
Yeah.
But I just think it's really important to develop a community and to know that like we all have value in this field and we all have something to add. And because that's true of us, it's true of everyone else. So
yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And Jenny, do you have anything in that area?
Yeah, it's I was actually going to say compassion, so Ellen got me on that with the empathy. I will say that I think one of the things that this remote working world has definitely helped everyone with is listening, active listening. We the fewer interruptions, having to use the raise hand feature, so everyone can really finish their thought and really express what they're trying to say without anyone jumping in, cutting them off. So I've appreciated that.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. So in the chat, people said they're following all the things after this, and Ellen noted you can follow @ArchitectPins on Instagram, and in addition to those other Instagram handles that we put out there. Anything else? We're right on time. Anything else? Anybody would like to have the final word or say anything else? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you all so much. It was really an honor to have you all as guests and have everybody here attend this evening. And thank you for helping us celebrate women and think about how our space and our roles are shaping up as we move forward in the profession of architecture. And it was great to share this time with you. Thank you very much all for attending.
Having
A pleasure meeting you.
Yes, very nice meeting you too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.